She stood at the counter, nervously clutching the few crumpled bills left in her purse. A small sigh escaped her lips as she counted again, just enough for a sandwich and a drink. It was her last dollar, quite literally. Rent was overdue, her phone was barely hanging on with no balance left for data, and her bank account was deep in the red. But today, she had an interview. And today had to be different. Dressed in her one good blouse, ironed the night before under the pressure of a heated pot, she had walked 2 miles to get to this little downtown cafe. It was close to the office where she would soon be interviewed. She needed a quiet moment to gather her thoughts. Maybe half a sandwich would help her settle her nerves before facing yet another corporate panel. As she approached the cashier to place her order, she noticed a man a few steps behind her. He looked somewhat flustered, patting his coat and jeans pockets, then letting out a breath like someone who had just realized they'd lost their wallet. He looked around, slightly embarrassed, clearly uncomfortable with the fact that he had no money on him. She turned her eyes away for a second. She didn't have enough to help him. She couldn't even afford her own meal tomorrow. But when the cashier gave her the total, something clicked inside her heart. She looked back at the man. Hey, it's okay. I'll cover his meal too. He looked up, surprised. What, I've got it, she said with a nervous smile. It's no big deal. He hesitated. Are you sure? You really don't have to do that. I know, she said softly. But I want to. The cashier rang up the order for both of them, and she handed over her last crumpled bills. As the receipt printed, she felt a mix of pride and panic rise inside her. She'd just given away her last dollar, but strangely, she didn't regret it. The man, mid-40s, well-dressed despite his current wallet situation, sat down across from her at a nearby table. She hadn't expected that. She thought he'd say thank you and move on, but instead, he looked genuinely interested. That was incredibly kind of you, he said. Especially in times like these. She nodded, offering a tight smile. I've been in worse situations. I know how it feels. They chatted for a few minutes. He asked about her, and she mentioned she was heading to a job interview soon. She didn't go into detail about how desperate she was, or that this was her 5th interview this month, or that the last 3 had ghosted her completely. She didn't say that the electricity in her apartment had been cut off or that she had cried herself to sleep more than once this week. He seemed like a good listener. Kind eyes. Curious, but not invasive. Eventually, she glanced at her watch. I really need to go, she said, gathering her things. He stood as well. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate what you did. It was nothing, she replied. It was everything, he said. With that, they parted ways. She walked into the tall building, heart thudding as she entered the reception area. It was a sleek, modern office, glass walls, minimalist decor, and a nervous energy humming from other applicants in the waiting area. She sat down, tried to fix her blouse again, and rehearsed the answers she'd practiced in the mirror. This had to be the one. There were no second chances after this. 20 minutes later, she was called in. When she entered the interview room, her breath caught. The man from the cafe was sitting at the head of the panel. He smiled warmly. Hello again, he said. Her eyes widened. You're the CEO. He nodded. Just started this week. I wanted to meet the team from the ground up. I like to get to know the people who'll help build the company. She was stunned. The others on the panel looked mildly confused but remained quiet. He gestured to the seat. Please, let's talk. The rest of the interview felt surreal. She answered questions with surprising confidence. Something in her had shifted. She no longer felt like someone desperate for a job. She felt like someone who had value, who made an impression, even when she had nothing. A few hours later, her phone rang. Hi, this is Amanda from our. We'd like to formally offer you the position. The CEO was very impressed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thanked them. She didn't know what to say. Life had gone from empty to hopeful in the span of a single act of kindness. A few days into the job, she ran into the CEO again. This time, it was in the elevator. He looked over at her and smiled. You know, he said, I wasn't planning to do interviews that day. I was just walking the neighborhood to get a feel for the area. I forgot my wallet at the hotel. That sandwich wasn't just food, it reminded me that this company needs people like you. People who act with heart, not just ambition. She nodded quietly. You hired me because I bought you lunch. I hired you, he said gently, because you treated a stranger with dignity. Because you did the right thing even when you didn't have much. That's the kind of integrity I want leading this company into the future. In the weeks that followed, she proved more than worthy of the position. Her work ethic, her creativity, and her quiet empathy made her stand out. Coworkers gravitated toward her warmth and sincerity. She rose through the ranks quickly, not because of favoritism, but because of who she was at her core. And every now and then, when she walked past that cafe, she remembered the weight of that last dollar. How it had felt to give it away without expecting anything in return. How that small act of compassion had rewritten the story of her life. The world often teaches us that success is earned through strategy, competition, and self-preservation. But sometimes, success finds those who give without expecting, who act with kindness when no one is watching, and who believe that no gesture is too small to matter. In a world that often feels hard and transactional, it's easy to forget the power of simple goodness. But stories like hers remind us, the universe notices. Kindness is a currency that never goes bankrupt. She didn't just land a job that day, she rediscovered her worth. She realized that despite everything life had taken from her, it hadn't taken her heart. And in the end, that made all the difference.